The GOAT conversation is certainly one that can often get the headlines, and I'm going to be honest, I've done it myself in the past. We did a podcast a little bit ago where we, made that the thumbnail, so we're all guilty in it here in the sports industry. However, there's certain aspects of it that are absolutely exhausting, so I figured let's make a list of my top 7 reasons why I hate the GOAT conversation. And number 7 on the list, we should start off with this. It's actually a fun conversation. I think that's part of the issue with it. It's like, it is fun to discuss who is better, Jordan or, LeBron or whatever. Like, it's always a fun discussion to be had. The Mahomes versus Brady, the Brady versus Montana before Mahomes came along. Like, even Brady versus Manning was a thing for a while. So, like, it's a fun conversation, and that's part of why it can, create some other issues. And part of why where my frustration lies is I actually enjoy having the conversation. Like I said, I've talked about it on this channel. It's just some of the other aspects of it is what kind of ruins it for me. Which then I think leads to more frustrations because I think it's a fun conversation that's getting kind of butchered. So it's a conversation that we all kind of listen to, but then maybe get frustrated when we hear it because of the other 6 reasons. Number 6, and again, this is just for me, this is just my opinion, but people act like there were no quarterbacks before the 80s, right? Like, that's a constant thing. Like, Montana will still get mentioned here and there, but basically it's like almost established fact that Brady and Mahomes are battling for one, or maybe Montana. Like, there's a lot of great quarterbacks over the years, right? Like, we can't have a GOAT conversation and leave out Sammy Baugh or Johnny Unitas or Otto Graham in the discussion, but people do because, partially because I'm not sure if everyone knows who Sammy Baugh is, but also because, they played in a different era. They didn't put the numbers that guys do now, but, like, I think it's still fair to say that, like, we should still respect the players who played, way before and still had a huge impact. Like, if you want to say the players weren't as good then, that's, like, objectively true. If you had a time machine and put Mahomes into that, era, he would have been better. But again, those guys didn't have a lot of the, advancements with health that we currently have. So that's part of the factor in all of it. So I always get frustrated when it's like, no one even mentions those other guys because, apparently football started with Joe Montana. It's not really how it works. So that's number 6 on the list for me. Number 5 is kind of the obvious one. It gets talked about to death. I mean, we talk about it. So the Jordan and LeBron thing. I think Kyle on the podcast mentioned that somehow one of the sports talk shows used both the Jordan and LeBron debate along with the Mahomes and Brady debate. It's like, we don't need to talk about this every single time one of these guys even wins a Super Bowl. It doesn't need to be talked about that much, let alone it feels like every week there's some sort of LeBron and Jordan debate or the Mahomes and Brady debate, which is just, again, like I said, it's a fun discussion to be had, but when we're talking about it every single week, it's no longer a fun discussion to be had. So that's a big part of the GOAT conversation itself. Not really a conversation, but just how frequently it gets talked about. Number 4, what makes a GOAT is subjective. Like, how do you define greatest of all time? Is it simply just like, if you wanted one guy to make one pass right now, who would you trust the most? Well, then it's not Otto Graham because he, played in a different era where like that, he didn't have the, the physical traits that a guy like Aaron Rodgers has, right? Is a GOAT, whoever wins the most like, I'll hear these discussions where someone will say, yeah, well, Breeze has more passing yards. And then someone else will say, yeah, but, Montana has 4 for 4 in Super Bowls. Well, it's like, well, those are just 2 different criteria. You're not arguing who is or isn't the GOAT. You're arguing what should or shouldn't make the GOAT. And it feels like no one wants to define exactly, like, again, if someone says to me, like, oh, I think Montana is the best quarterback because he's 4 for 4 in Super Bowls, like, at that point, I'm not arguing against Montana. I would argue against the criteria at play. And sometimes people don't even talk about criteria. They just talk about GOAT versus, not GOAT. And so because of that, again, things just get so muddy. Number 3 is it's not what sports are about. And maybe this is just a bit of a corny answer, but I think it's true, which is like, sports at the end of the day aren't about one player dominating. It's a team sport. Now, again, there are individual sports, and that's kind of what those are about to some degree. But the goal of the Kansas City Chiefs year in and year out is to try and see if they can win the tournament that they're entering in, win the season, be the best team in football that season. Not can we have our quarterback be the best quarterback, possible? And that's kind of why, going back to the, like, if you say, well, Montana, he was 4-0. Well, Jordan, he was 6-0. It's like, well, sports are about trying to do as good as you can. And so losing in the finals is better than not making the finals. At least it should be considered that way, but some people don't view it that way. Or like, I don't know, Tom Brady winning a Super Bowl, against the Rams the second time when he didn't play particularly well. Well, that's a good thing. They won a Super Bowl. That's an accomplishment for the Patriots. But instead, it's like, oh, well, maybe that hurts Brady's legacy because Belichick carried him to a Super. Like, how? Like, that's not how sports are supposed to be. So that's number 3 on my list. Number 2, Kyle brought this up on the podcast, and it's, a perfect take. One of my favorite takes he's had, which is everyone's already made their mind up. If you don't like Brady, you've already decided Mahomes is the GOAT. If you don't like Mahomes, you've already decided Brady's still the GOAT. If you like LeBron, there's very few things that LeBron could do for you to not now say he's the GOAT. Like, basically, I wouldn't say everyone's made their mind up. That's probably a bit too harsh, but 90 to 95% of people, no matter what happens, aren't going to change their opinion unless something drastic happens, like Mahomes wins 7 more Super Bowls, or Mahomes gets injured and never plays again. Other than that, pretty much everyone has already made their mind up about who is or isn't the GOAT, and then just reverse engineers whatever points they want to make to prove that their guy is the greatest of all time. And the way you can easily measure that is somehow every Patriots fan is still saying Brady's the GOAT. Every Chiefs fan is saying that Mahomes is the GOAT. I'll say it this way. Everyone who thinks Aaron Rodgers is the GOAT is a Packers fan. Everyone who thinks that Drew Brees is the GOAT is a Saints fan, right? People are arguing. It's not actually, hey, let's look into the data. Let's try to figure this out and see who should we view as the greatest of all time. It's instead just people reverse engineering their opinions, which happens in sports in general, but definitely in the GOAT conversation. And finally, the number 1 reason, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's not something that matters. And I guess you could argue how much do sports matter in general, but I think they matter a lot. I think people trying to accomplish something great is entertaining to watch and is admirable, and it's admirable traits in people to do that. But again, it's a team sport. It's not an individual sport. So that's what they should be looking towards. And the who is or isn't the greatest, at the end of the day, once LeBron retires, people might still have the argument, but at the end of the day, you're just going to say, oh yeah, remember when Jordan played? That was awesome. Oh yeah, remember when LeBron played? That was awesome. That's kind of how it's going to go. And you're even seeing it with Brady and Montana. Nobody argues who's better anymore because no one really cares who's better anymore. Maybe that's just because there's another guy who's quote unquote challenging for the throne. But I think when Mahomes retires, no one's going to look at it and say, no one's going to have the conversation anymore once Mahomes retires, because it's not something that really matters that much. What matters is getting yourself in the conversation and getting yourself as one of the guys, making yourself a legend that way, right? But in terms of, who is or isn't the GOAT when you're watching football, doesn't really actually change much, in my opinion. So that is my number 1 reason why the GOAT conversation is exhausting. And like I said, it's fun. It's a fun conversation to have. I'm not saying we shouldn't be having the conversation. I'll probably make another, I think I've made a GOAT conversation in the past. I'll probably make more because it is an interesting discussion to be had. So my critique is not with people having the GOAT discussion. My critique is with some of the people who are having the GOAT discussion and some frustrating things that I feel like they don't really feel like they acknowledge as much. So yeah, those are my 7 reasons why the GOAT conversation is exhausting. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.